Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitInWriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
My guest is Mr. Bonzai. He is an internationally renowned journalist, artist, photographer, so many other things. You've got probably a more diverse and confusing career than I do, which is saying quite a bit. You've been all over the map and done a whole lot of different things. Can you sort of summarize it in 30 words or less? Or?
Well, I was thinking about this. You know, I'm hoping that people will see this, and I don't expect them to follow my steps because I don't know if you could ever do that again. But if you see something in my life that goes, oh, that's interesting, I think you have to be very open-minded. And also when I graduated from college, I noticed that everybody was starting to think about their future and planning or not planning. This was kind of the extended summer of love, you might say.
I was going to say this is the mid-'60s when priorities were changing.
Right,
in that sense,
and I noticed that most people by the age of 25 had either decided to get a job, like knuckle down and bite the bullet and start organizing that way, or they just said, screw it, I'm just going to see what happens. Well, I'm kind of the first school. I graduated with a degree in English literature after studying 3 years here and 1 year in Scotland.
So was your goal to be involved in academia, or?
No, I think it was when I was a kid I wanted to be a teacher, but then I got over that. I started writing poetry in high school. I was kind of post-beatnik, pre-hippie. Mm-hmm. But I did dress sort of like Maynard G. Krebs with a cut-off sweatshirt and went to high school. I didn't have a beard. I don't think you could have a beard in high school. And
although I did see a photo of you, and you sort of looked like an extra on a Monty Python sketch with the little mustache and whatnot. It was quite dapper.
Well, when I moved to L.A., because I sold a story, I figured I'm legit now. I'm a writer. I sold a story. After publishing for 2 years in an airline magazine with no pay. They were going to pay me so small an amount. I said, look, don't pay me. Don't change one word. I was really, I had a way that I wanted people to read my work. And but get back to the way people are growing. Let's see. What was your question?
My question was did you actually have goals in terms of a career? Because you mentioned that you were of the former,
in
people
college, yes. I wanted to be a writer.
You wanted to be a writer, and you felt that was how you were going to make your living, quote unquote.
Well, I have to tell you, I first enrolled as a philosophy major. And
that pays well.
Yeah, but I studied with Dr. Daniel Dennett, who's world-renowned, outrageous professor now. We're still in touch. I did a portrait of him in Wire 2 years ago, and he's going to use it as his headshot.
Oh, I'd love it.
So we're still in touch. And he remembered me because I was a member of the guerrilla theater and stuff like that in college. But that didn't work out. When I got to medieval philosophy, I couldn't handle it. So I switched over to English with an emphasis on creative writing. And I started keeping a journal like Rainer Maria Rilke. And I've kept a journal from the 60s until I moved to LA in the 80s, probably the mid-80s. And then I picked up a camera, and that became, the follow-up of the journal. But I did keep an elaborate journal about all those years in between.
Well, that's one of the things that I think is interesting, though, is that you have always melded the visual and the verbal.
That was in my mind, but and when I first started doing interviews, first interview was with Van Dyke Parks.
Oh, wow.
Who introduced me to Harry Nilsson and Timothy Leary and a bunch of other people. And for that interview, I brought a bottle of Beaujolais Jadot and he didn't want to do the interview because there was a family thing going on, but I convinced him. I'm on deadline, my first deadline, and it worked out. And I realized then that all that writing stuff was where I wanted to go. The first interviews, I actually did a drawing of Van Dyke, and I would have them sign it for the story in mix. And after a couple of these, with Michael Palin from Monty Python, it was just taking too long to set up and do a portrait, drink a bottle of wine, do an interview. So I started bringing a little Olympus clamshell camera, little black and white camera, which I used for photographs that still look great of Les Paul in his home studio. And a couple of years later, I met my wife, who's a Japanese artist, and I wanted to document her work. So then I got a big camera, a Nikon. Things developed along those lines simultaneously, but I didn't stop drawing either. I haven't made a big splash in the art world, but I continue to do it until today. So you're right, there is a combo thing going on with visuals and writing. That's what I wanted to mention to whoever is watching, is that, if you can get a couple of skills down that you can use them in many different ways, writing, good communication is essential. It also makes you look, like you're intelligent if you can write correctly, and if you can't, you look like a dope. Then, as far as visuals go, it's easy. It's much easier now than it was for me, because I figured out the way I shoot. I was explaining to you that the way I shoot now is with a tripod, a big camera, a very wide-angle cinematic lens, and I use a flash in my hand so that I can find. You can
localize the light.
And with digital, you can find out immediately. It took weeks with analog film to get it back and go, this doesn't work.
Well, what's funny about that is that I was just having a conversation the other day with a record producer, and we were talking about the idea of walking around the room and listening to where things sound good. And I love that idea.
You've been talking to Al Schmidt and Bruce Swedien.
So many of us share the same philosophy that Al helped to foster. But I think that that's one of the things that is remarkable to me about what we can do with digital, because you can really localize everything and use these things as a tool and change the result. Yeah.
Because I was telling you, when I started out, I had a big flash. I'm photographing Bonnie Raitt, and I realized that it was going to take 2 seconds to recharge, and this was not going to work. She was kind enough to let me bust in on her session. I better get in and get out.
Right, and be a fly on the wall and disruptive as minimally as possible.
Just in and out, because I was a recording engineer. Oh, by the way. After college, I was in a theater group called Strange Mouth. Our motto was, in the great oral tradition. And I started doing guerrilla theater in college. Then we had a theater after graduation. We put on a 50-hour play. We actually did a play each night and just slept on the stage. A DJ came down at midnight, probably fried out of his brains on acid. And we did the whole show for him, alone, in the audience. He went to the radio station he worked for and said, well, we got to hire these guys. They're great. So we got hired as a comedy group, but that ended up me doing commercials because we were funny and we could write, and we did radio commercials.
First of all, I want to say I'm hanging on for dear life here at all these twists and turns.
Yeah.
But I think, we've talked about this offline before, you and I, how we've had such diverse careers and really just kind of following the muse and following the connections where they go. But there's a common thread here that I think is really interesting, and it's storytelling. And I've always considered myself a storyteller, and I've always considered you one as well. And I think all of these all of these different mediums that you're talking about, all of these different adventures, chapters of your own career, whatever it is, they've all involved telling stories in some way or another.
And getting stories from people.
And well, and I think that's the thing too, because it's not just telling the story, it's being able to get the subject of that story to open up in such a way that you get those little gems.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like record production.
Yeah, it is. I don't know exactly why it is, but people start unloading their lives to me.
I think the value is getting inside that person's head to be able to pull those thoughts out of them, pull that spontaneity out of them.
Well, maybe part of the way that I work is because, Mr. Bonzai doesn't have a driver's license. This pseudonym nom de plume stuff started when I was in radio, because I really didn't want people to come knocking on my door because of some of the things that I said on the air. So first it was David Strangemouth. The comedy group broke up. This is where I learned about production too, because I could probably I could cut 60 bits into a 1-minute commercial if they were recognizable bits of music like Aqualum, ba-da-da-da-da-da. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And, I cut commercials for Beatles collections. And of course,
and this all on analog tape, by the way, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
With a razor blade and everything.
Oh, yeah. I barely know anything about digital. But here's a sidelight. I started making money as a ghostwriter to introduce this new thing called digital audio to the professional audio industry.
Oh, my.
So, I met with head guys at Sony. This is where I learned about public relations, because nobody else knew how to explain this. Well, I had advertising background in radio. I'm a writer. After my years in radio production, and I was pretty good, and working with people as a voiceover artist and other DJs and stuff. I quit radio. Again, we get back to this. I changed my life about every 5 years.
And I want to divert to that for a moment, because you're kind of bouncing into all of these different things. Oh, and I did this, and I did this, and I've been the same way. I've been, I think a lot of it comes down to a combination of serendipity and trust, because you just trust what the universe is going to throw at you. But, I recently had a conversation with a friend who's also been in the music business his whole life. And one of the things that we talked about was the idea of success not necessarily having to be a permanent thing. You do something, you're successful at it. Do you keep doing that ad infinitum, or do you say, you know what, I've done that, I've had that experience, now I'm going to move on to something else?
Well, sometimes fate tells you that. You've
Absolutely,
heard of the
absolutely.
Peter principle. You rise to the top of your talent, and that's it.
Yeah, and
So,
if you're somebody who is a lot of times motivated by learning something new, I joke around a lot about myself being a lead actor in short attention span theater. I think, once you've gotten to the point where you've done something, you say, oh, I've done that. That's good. I enjoyed that. Now, what's that over there?
For me, it was more frustration.
Was it?
That, I just didn't like doing this anymore, or I got tired of it, or I thought that So I was a big shot in Canada, Montreal radio, creative director of the #1 station in Canada, and I almost became a Canadian citizen. But I decided to bag it and come back to California via Jamaica and Florida, and I was in car accidents and stuff, and I ended up in California recuperating from a broken back, and I found a story about a young guy who'd opened a recording studio, young brother of a girl I dated in college. So I got in touch with him. I ended up, working in a real recording studio. And again, after 5 years, we'd built it up from 8 tracks to 24. I've got credit on a Stevie Wonder album and worked with Edgar Winter and people like this, but I didn't know how to fix these kind of things.
Was this the inspiration for Studio Life?
Yes, because I no longer could fix a console at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it would be embarrassing. And also, I worked from 6 in the morning for commercials to late in the night with, drug-fueled rock and roll sessions, and I'm trying to collect the money from, some Hell's Angels type guys, and I could have gotten killed. And I went, oh, no, now I've had enough of this. So that's when I started writing stories about life in a recording studio. When it's happening, it's horrible. Afterwards, you're telling somebody, and then the wall fell through, and everybody's laughing, and I'm going, well, this is good humor. So I satirized all of my memories for 2 years, live in every month in Mix magazine. Ran out of stories, decided to take this Mr. Bonzai character into the real world and interview Van Dyke Parks. And that ended up 167 consecutive months where I would bring lunch too, and booze, and I'd take pictures. It was quite an adventure, but people liked it, and they would pass me on to the next guy. Harry Nilsson led to Timothy Leary, to bunches of people. I'm still doing it, but not. And after 2 years of the stories, then we took Mr. Bonzai into the real world, and then I did that for a long time, and I'm still doing it. But Daniel, this is your lucky day. I have the 2005 collection of my stories.
I love this
Faces
book.
of Music. Almost killed me. 400 photographs scanned from black and white film, and 160 interviews cut down from 3,000 words to 500. It's not available in it's out of print, but you can get it digitally, and the photos look great anyway.
Thank you, sir. I just want to tell you a
Pardon
brief...
the plug for
Yes.
my book. but
No.
25 years of lunching.
It's pretty amazing, actually. I don't want to put that on faders. I have
You've been in a recording studio before, yeah.
just a couple times. Yeah.
I used to manage the studio, so I had to deal with making sure things worked.
And it's funny. I worked at a studio, a well-known studio run by three brothers, and one of the brothers had this habit of always putting his coffee cup right there. And of course, he's the owner of the studio, so all of the techs, every time he would do that, would just go,
Coca-Cola is really bad.
It is. Actually, I've cleaned the faders for that and the other kind of Coke, and it gets really nasty and messy very quickly. Yeah. That combined with the nicotine and tars and everything in the air.
Oh, yes.
Back then.
It was studio life. I parodied everything.
It was pretty close to the truth. A lot of it.
Yes, I know. Well,
yes.
Johnny Terrific is really Stevie Wonder, and that's all I'm going to say. My inspiration for this style of writing was Robert Benchley. You probably not have heard of him. I think his grandnephew wrote Jaws. But anyway, and I had it illustrated by a lady who grew up with Benchley, Tracy Vanola. So it's the illustrations are very much in keeping with, New York Magazine in the 30s. And, and the satire, it's all jokes about working in a recording studio a long time ago. But some of the characteristics have not changed at all.
In so many ways, it's almost a prelude to Spinal Tap.
Right.
It's that same sort of tongue-in-cheek,
yes,
almost real, plausible deniability, as it were,
Yeah, I got some nice endorsements for studio life from some pretty well-known humorist people.
Well, it was one of many things that inspired me to want to be in the studio. And
well, I think you gotta make some money. So when I sold my story, you came without a job. I sold a story, but I didn't have a job. You asked about me. I was an extra for a while when I came up here. I was in True Confessions with Robert. I can say I co-starred with Robert De Niro.
Right, man walking down the street kind of
That's
thing, right?
Why I'm wearing Hollywood stuff from the 30s with my. I had to shave my beard off so that I could look like a cool cat from the 30s. But here we are today, in Ocean Way. I mean, oops, it used to be Ocean Way.
Used to be Ocean Way, yes.
Yeah, it's been united. It was originally United, and it was Ocean Way for a while, and it's back as United. These rooms are the same rooms that have been used since the 50s. And I've had the great fortune to be here taking photographs for more than 20 years. In this very room, I photographed Brian Wilson and Jeff Beck, No Doubt, Green Day, a really sweet session with Paul Anka and Al Schmidt, because Paul Anka, he co-wrote the theme to The Tonight Show.
It was a very, very talented
You
fellow.
know who his co-writer on that was?
No.
Because there's no words. Johnny Carson. So when Carson heard, well, you mean I get half the every night? Okay, let's do it. So Paul Anka is like, a modern day king in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of people. He's got his herb tea, and he's preparing for a vocal. And I know Al. I don't know Paul Anka. I'm just trying to be present, but
right.
not too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so Al, right here, I said, Al, do you think we could get a picture with Mr. Anka? Because that's who he is in the studio. Well, let me ask him. So Al asks him, and Mr. Anka just gets all excited and is hugging Al, and I get the chance to get these photos of these two
Wow.
guys who've known each other probably since he was a teenager, I don't know. But that's a great thrill of this place. And it's got integrity, and the rooms I know now so well that, because you got to get in and out in a hurry if you're busting in on a session.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I work, and I continue doing that. And I also write stories about what's going on here at the studio and other studios. I photographed in most of the main studios in LA. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, and you have been, one thing that I think is really unique is the way serendipity has played into so much of what you've done. And I've always believed that, many of us, we're building the bridge as we walk on it. We're figuring it all out as we go. And, I have taken solace in meeting other people who have had the same odd career path type of thing that I have. And I love that because it takes a certain courage, I think, to be able to just say, I'm going to trust that whatever happens is the right thing, and that is something that, I think you talk about going to college and preparing for things and saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And that's great for some people. But I think there are many of us who are just creative souls in that sense. And just to be able to say, I'm going to try this because it interests me,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it will lead to something, even if it doesn't. I think what's wonderful to me is the idea of being, there's the old joke about jack of all trades, master of none.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that in certain ways I fit that description, and you do as well. Although I think you've
no,
mastered a lot
no.
of things,
Oh,
but
okay.
you've mastered a lot of things. But what I think is interesting is that you've kind of gone in, just blindly, we used to say, just balls as big as coconuts, just walk in and brave something, do something, and see if it fits. And if it doesn't fit, you've at least still gained that experience.
Yes, you do have to. But again, many of my life decisions came about because I just got pissed off and tired of doing things.
Short attention span.
And
right?
wasn't enjoying it anymore,
Yeah.
But if you've got a job and you want to do something else, you don't have to just quit and go to the new thing.
Right.
Start doing
Dabble.
over here until maybe some cash starts flowing in that towards you from that stuff, and slowly get yourself. But sometimes, I just blew it. I just left.
And sometimes
I quit
one needs
radio.
to.
And
sometimes you need to, because sometimes I think you need to just stir it up.
Yeah, stir up your own life.
Yeah, exactly. Move to a different country. I've done that. I know you have as well.
Oh yeah, my quick history. I was born, started life in Manhattan. I went to school, elementary school in New York, North Carolina, Miami, junior high in Miami, came out to California, finish high school. I was a smart kid. I got scholarships. I went to the University of California.
UC Berkeley?
No, UC Irvine. I was in
Irvine.
the first year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm somewhat responsible for the anteater being the mascot. This is the style of the '60s. We did not trust the establishment. We didn't trust older people. I still don't, even though I am a bit older. That led to theater. I said that, and then radio. But before that, I wanted to meet John Lennon. So I got accepted to the study abroad program. I applied for Sussex because I knew that's near where he lived, Weybridge, Surrey.
So that was your entire motivation for applying to in that
Also
area?
escaping America during the Vietnam War and having a student deferment, decide while I went over there. So, but I packed everything in a duffel bag and didn't know if I was coming back. But I had been involved in an experiment at Irvine. I was the lab manager for an experiment that involved biofeedback and brain waves and monitoring that activity in your brain with headsets and stuff like this. And I discovered some stuff that I think John Lennon should know about this, among other things. It was mostly his sense of humor. I enjoyed his books and his cartooning.
He had written some really amazing books back then, Spaniard in the Works, in his own right, Mm-hmm.
So with that, and I wrote letters to the Beatles management, and when I...
Did you receive responses?
Well, no.
Okay.
But when I got to London, I got assigned to go to University of Edinburgh in Scotland instead of Sussex. But what can I do? So I had 10 days in London to meet John, and I met with the head of their company and explained I had some stuff that I thought John would enjoy. Oh, very interesting. Well, we'll be sure to give him your request.
Absolutely.
We can't give you his phone number. Oh, okay. Well, with that, I figured I'm going to get arrested. So I went down to Weybridge.
How did you find out where he lived?
Well, I walked around the town, and there was a kid about my age, and I asked him if he knew where John Lennon lived, and he said, "Oh, certainly. He lives up the road here. Let's go take a look." So we go up, and I can see the house we've seen some stuff from the history. But you see this big gate. It's like this 12-foot gate, power gate. Don't step over that line. You'll be arrested. Oh, but his wife takes his kid to school every morning in a yellow Porsche over here. Maybe she could help you. Okay, great. So I go back to London, get there at 5:30 in the morning, came very respectfully up to his wife as Julian toddles off to school, show her that I've embroidered John's face on my back in my tie-dyed jacket, and she was friendly and kind, and she said, "Well, I've got to go shopping in London. Sorry, I can't help you. Bye." So I went, "All right, here we go." Stepped over the gate. The gate didn't close. I didn't get arrested. I was scared a little bit. I got all my notes and everything. I walk up to the house, and out of the second-story window, a lady the housekeeper sticks her head. "Hello, can I help you?" And I went, "Yes, is John home?" He's asleep right now. Could you come back later?" "Sure."
Thereby giving you license to come back later.
So I come back later, and she says, "He's still sleeping." She says, "I think it's okay if you wait in the garage until he wakes up. I'll get you some tea and biscuits."
That would be the garage.
What?
The garage.
A garage, yes. So I'm sitting in the. This is about 4 months after John got the painted Rolls Royce.
So you're sitting next to the famously loud
and I'm
Rolls
going
Royce.
Like this.
Yes.
And also all that tea, I really had to pee. It just went on and on. I kept wandering around. Is there it's an ink and a bit of. So finally, the Beatles manager, Peter Brown, comes out, and he's holding some postcards that they're supposed to sign. And he says, "What's all this about anyway?" And I gave him, I guess you call it your
the
30-second
elevator pitch.
pitch. And he said, I don't know. I'll see what I can do. So he goes in the house. Again, nothing happens. Finally, John Lennon walks out. And he walks up to me because I'm standing at the open door of the garage with my legs crossed like this. And he comes out and he doesn't say anything. And I walked up to him and I said, "Gee, you can't do this." And he said, "What? What's that?" I said, "Meet John Lennon." He goes, "Oh, I suppose not. Come on in. I'm having breakfast." So I go in. They park me on a sofa and John's alone at the table eating breakfast. Cynthia made eggs and tomatoes, really special stuff. So I brought my notebooks and sat down at the table, started talking to him, and he went, and he said, after he finished, he said, "We got to go into London to do the Frost program. Would you like a lift?" "Oh, yeah." So the Rolls comes out with a chauffeur. I sit on the jump seats, I think, with Peter Brown. John's in the big seat. It's a huge car. We drive a couple blocks away, and we have to pick somebody up. George comes out. He climbs in. And for an hour we spend in the car. They had just gotten the script to Yellow Submarine. They were joking about Eric Burdon wanting to tour in China. Impossible then. And I also we talked about spirituality and transcendental meditation. I didn't have any experience with that at all, but George was very kind to me. He had these really, dark, penetrating eyes, and he took my journal and he drew the levels of consciousness and gave me some tips on which books to read, And we got to London, and it was Sergeant Pepper had only been out a couple months, and it was just nuts. Thousands of people.
Well, and you're in a very identifiable vehicle, too, so, yeah, it kind of helps.
As we're driving through the countryside, people on their bicycles would go, "Whoa!" So we get there, and Peter Brown drags me through the crowd up to the back of the television studio, and they start talking. They're on their way to India, and they start talking about stuff. And John paraphrased what I just told him about the similarity between meditation and sleep. You don't know when you fall asleep until you wake up. And he used that in the interview with David Frost, and I'm going, am I really here?
Wow.
So the show finishes, we go down, I'm introduced to David Frost. We all head out with security to get to the car. We get in the car, we're driving for, 10, 15 minutes. I don't know what's going on. I sense that we're going to do something now. Maybe it's recording. I don't know. I've never even been in a recording studio. I think I nudged John and went like this, and he says, "Oh, yeah, come on in." So he pulls me in. I go into Abbey Road. Never been in a studio. We go upstairs. Ringo's reading a comic book. I meet George Martin. Paul showed up later. Or he was there sleeping under the piano, I discovered later. And I was there the night that they were finishing the tidbits for I Am the Walrus.
Oh, the sound collage at the end.
Tuning in the radio live. Ringo's spinning the dial on the radio to see if he can find something. And they hear this, "Oh, hell yes, Barry
King Lear. Yeah.
Right. And that gets laid down. I talked to George Martin years later, but to me at that time, John was really running the show. I mean, he was
interesting.
These were these faders that went like this and all.
Right, I remember those.
I've never seen any of this stuff, but I was there for about 8 hours, and they didn't. I had fish and chips. Mal Evans went and got the fish and chips. Nobody. I wasn't a journalist. Maybe I don't know. I was just a student. They just accepted me, and I asked questions occasionally. I heard the chorus to Walrus, and I asked George, what are they saying? Da 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 da. He says, "No, everybody's got one."
Yes.
Everybody's got one. Oh, and then later I heard it, and everybody thought it was everybody
smoked pot. Yeah.
Well, not according to George.
Well, I mean, there's so much of that, that's open to interpretation. But But if I may redirect you,
I'll just stop quickly because I left on my own because I didn't want to ask for a
Did
ride
you?
at midnight, and I caught a tube. But I corresponded with John during the year, and 2 days before I finished school, I got 2 letters, one from Peter Shotton, one from Peter Brown, saying, if you're in London, please come by. John would love to see you again. So we'll get to that later.
okay, yeah, well, I'm only redirecting you because we're running tight on time here, and
Yes.
I mean, I love all this, and I could do 3 hours with you if we had the time. But we had discussed earlier that certain things we wanted to cover, and one of them is, I think, sort of a zoom out, if you will, on your career path, because your career path is so, I think, I don't like to use words like inspirational and stuff like that, because quite honestly, as with my own career path, I think no one should try and follow what we've done because it's so convoluted and out there, and everybody's got their own path.
It wouldn't work.
Right, exactly. But there are certain facets of what you've done that I personally find a commonality with, and I think it's so, to me, as endeavoring to teach younger people, I think one of the things that is so interesting to me is just this idea of really being open to whatever happens. And that story is proof positive of that. I mean, you certainly could not have prepared for that. In
guess
fact,
not.
you were prepared to basically get arrested.
Well,
know,
no,
so-
I wasn't. I prepared as much as I could, but it just didn't work out.
Right.
But they, I'm not sure. But when I got to the top of their management, and Tony Barron, I think his name says, sorry, I can't give you his phone number. They might have mentioned something to each other. I have no idea why it worked out so well, but I followed through. I did drawings from Lewis Carroll, which I sent to John, pen and ink, because I studied drawing, by the way, with David Hockney in college, and I know a little bit about life drawing, and I got invited back. That'll be another story, though. But you can't plan on these things. You can only project what you think might work. You do have to have cojones, though, because if you walk in and you want to do something like that, so somehow I walked the line of, I was determined, but I wasn't obnoxious. In fact, the year later when I met Yoko in the Apple offices, she kind of went, "Who's this?" and John said, "Well, this is David. He's from California. I found him in my garden last year, and
He's a garden gnome. Yeah.
So that's how it happened."
But you know what I think is really, it's funny in certain ways. There's that old saying about making plans and the universe laughs. I think the idea of making plans but being completely open to them being tossed out the window is really, in certain ways, it's how we live, isn't it?
It is, and here's a specific example of that. When I'm doing an interview with somebody, and I'm known for asking some kind of weird questions, like, what music would you like played at your funeral? And I think Willie Nelson said, well, wait a second, I still feel pretty good. I do things like that, and sometimes it backfires. And if you're in the middle of an interview and it backfires, you got to backpedal. You got to change the subject. You got to, but not getting angry or whatever. Just be sensitive to who you're talking to. And if that's not working, pick something else to talk about.
Well, it's improvisation to a certain extent.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always been a big fan of improv as well, and I think that's...
I did my share of
I'm
improv.
sure you did.
Yeah.
Somehow or another, I think whatever I mentioned, you could tick a box and say, yeah, I did that too. And so, but and I love that, and that's something that people tell me about myself as well. I think we've dabbled in so many different things, and...
Well, I'm genuinely interested in people.
Yes,
and
exactly.
How they got where they are.
And they have wonderful stories.
And that's what I've been sharing with people in my books and in my interviews. And I do video interviews too. I mean, presently I'm doing the Bonzai beat with Nam, and in the past couple of months I've talked to Steve Vai and asked him if his eyebrows ever get tired. And Mitchell Froome, I'm going to, coming up is Cat Edmondson.
Oh, wonderful.
Who I interviewed with Al Schmidt on stage at an AES show.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not retired.
Well, thankfully, no.
I can't retire. I still got bills to pay.
Well, isn't that all of our... Well, you know, it's funny because I don't think I would retire even if I could, because I think for what we do,
Mm-hmm.
this is not work. This is sheer enjoyment, and this is in a certain...
Don't believe him.
Well,
it's much harder.
It's really hard work. Well, you know, and I will give you that. I mean, everything that we do...
Some of it.
It's hard work. It definitely is.
You got to be organized.
You do. But, you know, the other thing about it is it's lifeblood. Man, I mean, to me, I live for those moments when I can be in touch with someone, when I can get that story out of them. I think isn't that inspiring to you?
It is. I mean, it started probably for me when I was at Abbey Road that night. I'm hearing things. I'm hearing Fool on the Hill,
Mm-hmm.
just a vocal. I'm hearing bits of this and bits of that. Some stuff didn't show up for a couple of years. But I knew that Magical Mystery Tour was going to be a big deal. And all the songs I was hearing were going to be heard by millions and millions of people. There was something about, I'm hearing it first.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I still dig that.
Absolutely. I love
waited,
that experience.
I waited outside a vocal booth while Willie Nelson didn't take after take. Chris Christopherson is producing, and I'm going, I don't mind waiting to hear another take. I could hear it through the door, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then I took my photos.
Yeah. Well, and that, you know, the experience of, it's interesting, I always consider places like this temples of sound to a certain extent. And we are watching things being created within these walls. And that to me was what drew me to the studio as well, was the idea of I'm working with other creatives. I'm watching these moments happen. And in fact, I do a panel at NAMM every year about the creative process where I call it Capturing Lightning, where we talk about not what microphone did you use, but how did you get inside the artist's head to get this performance out of them?
Exactly what I try to do is find out the inside story that they might not have told.
Right, the human aspect of it.
Oh, and once again, it's your lucky day, because another book, now this one is still in print. This is Music Smarts, and this has just one quote from the people I've talked to with a little photo that I took. It's like a handbook. You note the cut corners here so that
Look
you
at
can,
that.
It's a field guide. You can put it in your back pocket. Wait a second, finishing the mix. There's a point that just clicks in and you know when it works instinctively. There is that point. Mike Shipley, no longer with us, but fine. And for you.
Thank you, sir. I love this.
Music Smarts.
Mm-hmm.
That was a double meaning.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you that I have been wanting to interview you for some time because I won't say that I have followed in your footsteps in that sense, because I don't think anyone can, but a lot of what you have done has inspired a lot of what I've been doing. And I find that there's a certain affinity that one must have with the creative process as a concept, as well as with those who work in creative arts, because there's a trust that you have to place in just everything's going to work. You know, we're going to catch that magic. We're going to have that happy accident. And that's the same kind of trust that I think you've exhibited in your career. I know I've exhibited in mine. It's just a matter of whatever happens is going to be okay. Whatever happens, it's going to lead to something else that is going to be the right thing. And I love that, because I think that's something that you can't preordain.
No, And it also might not work.
And you know what?
You
Half
gotta
the
be
time
ready
it
for
doesn't.
that.
Absolutely. But you know, that's what I love about it is, yeah, it might not work, but it'll lead to something else. And that experience is going to be with me no matter what. And you've taken all those experiences, and even as disparate as they may be, you've melded them into a career that it's hard to describe. You know, and that's what I love about this. It's like if I try and say, author, artist, whatever, I'm going to leave something out.
Well, I've always been skeptical about authority, so I've always questioned all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been I stopped going to the office in my early 30s.
There was an office?
Well, a recording studio
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
has an office.
Mm-hmm.
A radio station has an office.
Sure.
A theater has an office. It requires you to be someplace all the time, regularly.
Uh-huh.
I didn't like that. So when I decided to become a writer, I said, I'll do anything as a writer. I had a typewriter, I had a telephone, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
And if a job came in, that's how I got the job to introduce digital audio to the industry, is they wanted to pay me to have other people explain it. So anyway, that was the big change in my life, is no longer having to. I mean, I can eat whenever I want, whenever I'm hungry. I can go to the bathroom whenever I want. I have my privacy. Thanks to technology, has made my life easier. Every decade has made it easier and easier. Now I can do my thing via the internet and do live Zoom things with people all over the world. And I think that freedom, personal freedom, was the main motivation factor in my life. It wasn't trying to accumulate material stuff, although I'm not adverse to that. And you do need a certain amount of cash to keep the thing rolling.
But that comes if you're doing what you really want to do eventually. Well, hopefully it comes. I've always believed, and it sounds a little bit hippie woo-woo, but I've always believed that if you're doing the right thing, eventually it will pay off, and there have been times for myself as well, and I'm sure it's happened with you, where you've changed something, you've changed careers or whatever it is, and there's been this fallow period of, am I doing the right thing here? It's not quite working out. But if you're impassioned about doing something, and, like myself, you're impassioned about the arts, you're impassioned about the creative process, I think being around that, eventually something's going to click. At least we hope so, anyway.
Yeah, we're not alone, but again, we are.
Yeah.
I used to say, we're all alone in this boat together. That's, I have faith in humanity. I'm an example of, kind of an oddball career that worked out. I couldn't have done it alone, but I had to motivate myself and others to make it happen.
Not just once either, continually.
Yeah, it's not going to stop. You're not going to graduate and then everything's going to be smooth. You're not going to always. I figured everything out now. Oh, great! Now I can relax.
Of course not.
It doesn't work like that.
And as you said earlier, you're not going to reach a certain point and go, I'm successful. Because
what's success anyway?
Exactly. You define success for yourself, but what I also think is applicable, especially in this conversation, is you reach a successful point with one thing and you move on to something else. Because, you know what? I know how that's done now. I've experienced that. And life is all about experiences. It's not about material things. Yeah.
Oh, of course. I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah.
A recording studio, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that make it happen. You know, the technicians, I used to do it. And I
As
appreciate
did I,
it.
yeah. And there's the people who are behind the scenes work the hardest.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I love about this industry too, is that as you're coming up doing that hard work, you're learning all that stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm having a good time.
You and me both, man. I love this.
I wish you the best. You too, and everyone else.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzai. Thank you for being my
My
guest.
pleasure. Maybe we'll talk again.
I'm sure we will. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.